First of all, I want to thank Rabbi Michael for contacting me, asking me to come and talk, because one of the things that I like about Rabbi Lerner is he's an inclusive person, and one of the things that our Abrahamic traditions suffer from is exclusivism. Many of the peoples that adhere to Abrahamic teachings, whether they be Jews, Christians, or Muslims, tend to see themselves as having some monopoly on the truth. And monopoly on the truth, as far as any real Abrahamic tradition would say, would be God's alone. And that's why arrogating the voice of God to oneself is probably the most dangerous and really the capital sin of people that claim God, to arrogate that voice. God, if we accept or even assume the possibility that He did speak, or the divine spoke through these revelations of the Old Testament or the Older Testament, the Newer Testament, and then the Quran, which each one has their claim. If we do accept that, there's certainly God has many voices. And to claim any one voice to be the exclusive voice of God is a very dangerous thing to do. But unfortunately, it's something that we tend to fall into. Human arrogance is a major problem. Pride is actually, interestingly enough, in Mount Purgatorio, in Dante's Purgatorio, pride is at the bottom. It's where you begin. You can't even start ascending the mountain. To get lust is the last one, by the way. But you can't even start ascending that mountain of purifying oneself until pride is dealt with. And religious tradition deals with pride greatly, but one of the major problems is that attempting to get close to God is something that necessitates humility, but at the same time, because so many people are very distant from their experience of the divine, it becomes very easy to start seeing yourself as somehow a cut above the rest when one's living a righteous life, or attempting to live a righteous life. When you see a lot of people out there who are living less than righteous lives, it becomes very easy to become arrogant about that, which is why that sin is just such a major focus in the Abrahamic traditions, the sin of pride. It's really the great sin. So just having said that, I honor Rabbi Lerner for doing that. And he asked me to talk about generosity in the Islamic tradition. And what intrigued me about that question of generosity, what is generosity? When you talk about generosity, we use words all the time, and we don't really think about what those words mean. Generosity in the Abrahamic tradition, certainly in the Islamic view, is one of the virtues. It's considered, in Arabic they say fada'il, one of the virtues. And fadl, which is the root word of the word for virtue, means to overflow, to pour out of, like the cup runneth over. Virtue is something that pours out of a virtuous heart. And generosity is a virtue, but if you really look, this is called generosity, Generous Sunday. The virtue of generosity is not a cardinal virtue in the Islamic tradition, and it's neither in the traditional Christian, and many of the Jewish ethicists would agree with this also. The cardinal virtue is actually courage. Generosity is actually considered a branch of courage. And the reason for that, people say, well, how is generosity related to courage? The reason people aren't generous is fear. That's really what's going on all over this planet. I mean, we're in this incredible zone of fear. And one of the things about humans, we are unique in our fear. We don't, as far as we know, there are no other species out there that have developed anxiolytic drugs like Valium to reduce fear. Jesus said if you had faith, you would go out like the birds in the morning and come back satiated in the evening. Birds are not anxious about losing their job. They don't really. They don't have 401k plans. They're not worried about what's going to happen when they get old. Who's going to look after them? But humans are. We're filled with fear. And one of the interesting things about our religious traditions is that they're actually designed to alleviate fear. I mean, that's what's so stunning about them, is that they're designed to teach people how to trust. And trust is difficult, especially when you've learned the bitter lesson of being betrayed. I mean, how many people were born into families in which that sacred covenant of parent-child relationship was betrayed because the mother was an alcoholic, or the father was abusive, or they abandoned them, or whatever reasons. Everybody has their stories and their experiences. And that first, according to Erickson, in his tradition in developmental psychology, that first crisis is trust versus mistrust. When a child cries, we used to have people in this culture that taught people to ignore the cries of a baby. No culture has ever done that before. I mean, that was some idiot who had a PhD in psychology that thought, gee, just ignore the cry of a baby. But when babies cry, my wife can distinguish. I'll hear them crying and I'll start to panic. She said, no, it's okay. I know that cry. He's just upset because a toy got taken away or something. So she distinguishes between the cries of her children. She knows when it's a cry that she has to respond to immediately, and when it's a cry, she can go into her conflict resolution mode and go down and deal with. I mean, if we let mothers deal with all of these global problems, really they would be resolved, because they're brilliant. They're doing conflict resolution every day. Every day. I see it every day. And what's it about? It's about sharing. It's about caring. It's about teaching them what's mine, what's not mine, boundaries, borders. Boundaries are really important in households. Just learning about boundaries and what's privacy and the need for people to have boundaries honored. And when we go and we take national boundaries that people take very seriously and we aggress upon them, neighbors will get very upset if you take 1 inch off that property line. It's not going to affect his property, right? 1 little inch when you build your new fence. But I guarantee you, your neighbor is going to be really angry because you've done that. And that's why, like Robert Frost, although he didn't really intend this, said good fences make good neighbors. I mean, he was using that ironically, because what that poem is really about is there's something in nature that doesn't love a fence. That fences are also problems because we build fences to keep others out. And sometimes fences should have at least doors, gates, where it's open, and if we respect them, at least that door is always open. So in the Islamic tradition, generosity is related to courage. And what's interesting is courage is a virtue that is predicated on being informed by 2 other virtues. And if those 2 virtues are not there, you can't be courageous. And those 2 virtues are justice and wisdom, prudence. And that's why a plan of generosity is actually a courageous plan, but it's also a just plan, and it's a prudent plan. So it really is something that if we think about it at a deeper level, we'll recognize this is the right thing to do. Prudence necessitates it. One of the traditions about the Prophet Muhammad, and I would really recommend, because he, I believe, is one of the most defamed people in the West. People, 1 billion point something, revere and love the Prophet Muhammad. He's worth learning about in the same way Buddha is worth learning about. I mean, when millions of people look to a figure as a source of guidance, it's just a wise thing to know something about those people. Really, because it helps you, to know something about Moses, about Jesus, about Muhammad, about Buddha, about Lord Krishna. All of these traditions help us understand each other better. And one of the things that really is so striking about studying comparative religion, which is what my degree was in, is that the more you learn about these religions, I have found, the more you come to respect them. That denigrating the religions, and I've been in my share of exclusivist tradition, because when I first became Muslim, that is the type of Islam that I was introduced to. So I've been through my share, so I know how it is to look through the exclusivist eyes. It's very easy to do. It makes the world very simple. All the grays are removed. Black and white are easy colors to negotiate. So it's very easy, but when you begin to look at the nuances of our traditions, what you really find is that they're deeply compatible at those most basic fundamental levels, because they are teaching universal truths, and they would not resonate in the millions of hearts that they resonate in if that was not true. Cults do not last. They don't. They die out. You have cults, and you have cults within universalist traditions. There's no doubt about that. There are cults within Christianity, within Islam, within Judaism, within Hinduism. You will have that cultic phenomenon because it's part of the human condition. But the essential truths are universal truths that ring true for millions of people. The Prophet Muhammad said, human hearts were made to incline to love those who do good to them. That is a statement about human nature, that human hearts incline. Hearts are made to love those who do good to them. And I have traveled all over the world. I've lived in the poorest countries on the earth. I lived in Mauritania. I lived with Bedouin in the Sahara. And what I've noted is, if you treat people with dignity, they tend to reciprocate. I have rarely found that principle to be not true. Every once in a while you meet people that just, they've got a problem, and you're not the problem, you just happen to be the object of the problem at the time. But there are people out there like that, and you're going to find them. But being honoring people, and the word in Arabic for generosity, there are actually several words. The Arabs are very generous people, even with giving the word generosity different words. The Arabs, one of the words that they use, and the most important one, is called karam. And the word karam, the root of it, karama, means to be honored. And karama, which is human dignity, is the same word for generosity. So honoring people is being generous to people. And when you're generous to people, you're honoring them. In the Islamic tradition, 2.5% of your wealth, your standing wealth, not income tax. Income tax was actually considered in the Islamic tradition to be oppressive. But there is a capital tax of your wealth every year, which is your standing wealth that one entire year has passed over and that wealth was there. You're obligated to give to the poor 2.5% of that wealth, every Muslim. Farmers and pastoral people are obligated to give 10 to 5%, depending on their circumstances, of their agriculture and their livestock to poor people. Now, the reason for that, according to the Islamic sages who commented on the Quran, was in order to remove resentment from the hearts of people. Because wealthy people get wealthy off the backs of poor people. And if you do not give back, it creates resentment. And in creating resentment, you create social instability. And so it's actually in the best interest of the wealthy people. This is prudence. It is in the best interest of the wealthy people to give back to those communities. And this is one of the problems, and I really hate this about, there's a whole slew, there's a book out right now about the power of being nice. And it's all about, if you're nice, you're going to make more money. You know, I'm so troubled by that philosophy, by that mentality, because I don't want to be nice for an ulterior motive. I want to be nice because that is what it means to be human. That part of humanity is just being good to other people. And that is the majority of people. If you walk around, the majority of the people, you ask them for time, they'll look at their watch. And they'll give you the time. That's an act of kindness. You know, I was at a gas station. I didn't have my wallet. I ran out of gas. I went in and I asked a man, can you loan me. I'll bring the $2 back. I just need $2 to get. And he gave me the $2 from his own pocket. He's working behind the thing. That was it. He could have said, no, I can't do that. And that's happened to me before. I mean, I went to a bank the other day to ask for change for 20. I'm sorry, are you a customer here? I said, no. And she said, well, we can't unless you're a customer. I said, well, gee, won't think about becoming a customer, will I, with that kind of attitude? So I left the bank, and I'm never going to go to that bank, right? So that's just bad policy. That's hence those books. Being nice is going to help your business. But, I went across the street and asked for a change for 20, and this lady smiled and gave me, I wanted to sit down and have a cup of coffee just because she gave me change for $20. That's what it does to hearts. You actually feel good about people that do good to you. So in giving the 2.5%, there's a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad. He said, the hand over is better than the hand under. Meaning the one giving is better than the one taking. With charity, when you're giving your zakat, what you owe, this isn't like extra charity. This is a tax that is to be given, and it's a right of poor people. It's not, so you're not doing them a favor. It's something you owe those poor people. In the books of Islamic jurisprudence, you're supposed to offer it with your hand under so that they take it over. Because they are doing you the favor. You're not doing them the favor. They are doing you the favor by enabling you to purify your wealth. Because the word zakat means to purify in Arabic. And the idea is that in accruing wealth, you will accrue wealth that is not healthy money. There's a percentage that's just going to be dishonest, or there was some. And that, giving back to those poor people, is a way of purifying your wealth. The same root, zakat means to grow. So it actually helps your wealth grow. The word in Arabic for being a miser, mumsik, is the same word for constipated. Right? Really, it's the same word. The word for pure gold is the same word for meconium stool, which is the first stool a child has. Right, in Arabic, iqi, which it means pure gold. It's the same word for a baby's crap. Right? Because that is ultimately what wealth is. It's fertilizer. You spread it around, and wonderful things come forth from the earth. You keep it all in one place, and a foul stench emanates from it. And that's the nature of this wealth that we've got. We've got a handful of people that are controlling the majority of the world's wealth. And it's absurd, it's obscene, and ultimately it's creating immense social instability. I'm on the C100, so I go to the World Economic Forum, and I've been doing that for 6 years. So I've been around a lot of these people, and I don't like divides of left and right. I really don't. I don't want to be designated as left or right, because I just feel like we need to get out of those paradigms. Anybody who studies social psychology will know that people do those automatically. It's not about choice. It's really about social programming. It's the way we've been designed. And once you realize that, there's something absurd about partaking in that type of stupidity of just falling on one side or the other. Should it be 1% or 2%? People will always do that. And what we really need to do is elevate people to get out of these paradigms. These are paradigms that are really causing an immense amount of problem for us on this planet, in this country. I'm very happy about this, because I think what Michael said about, to hell with realism, or realism, the word in Arabic for real is the same word for a name of God, al-haq. God is real. And another word for God is al-Karim. There's 99 names in the Islamic tradition. Al-Karim means the generous one. And in the Quran, there's a verse, and it really is, it's a question. It's in a sense a rhetorical question, but it says, Ya ayyuhal insan, ma gharraka bi rabbika al-karim. O human being, what has deluded you about your generous Lord? What has deluded you about your generous Lord? Why aren't you recognizing the generosity of what's been created for you? And one of the commentators of the Quran said that God gave the answer in the question. It's your generosity that has deluded us. You've been so overwhelmingly generous. we become ungrateful. Do you know, there's so much abundance out there. There's so much to be thankful for. And people tend to forget that. Well, right now, we're erring on the other side. We're not being generous enough. And people are suffering from realism. They're suffering from realism. And I think it's time for a little bit of the delusion of hope. You know, just the delusion of hope. Because even rats, you know, they've done these experiments of rats and timing. I mean, it's amazing who thinks of these things, but just timing how long a rat can survive swimming in a pot of water before drowning. And so they'd find it on average was about 7 minutes. So what they started doing, about 6 minutes and 50 seconds, they would pull them out. And what they found is that the rats that were pulled out would actually end up trying longer and breaking those records of going on 10, 11 minutes because they were thinking that they were going to get pulled out. So we need to give people hope because there's a lot of people drowning out there right now, and they just need hope. So thank all of you.